Yay!
Yay, we are recording.
You are recording.
Okay. So I am going to ask Rebecca to start us off with who she is, where she is. She did take a little bit, but what does that kind of weather make possible for you?
Hello, everyone. Rebecca Hurd. I'm beaming in from McCall, Idaho. It's 100 miles north of Boise and significant terrain climb up into the high mountains. So as I look out my window, there's a little bit of rain right now, but what the norm is for a lot of snow. I live in a snow globe. And what that makes possible is that is both the economic engine vital in our community for recreation, tourism, and all that comes from that as far as employment for folks. And what that makes possible for me is a very strong sense of community. I'm a snow lover, so I think of all the friends and relationships I've made through love of being at the hill, which I see right out my kitchen window, and all the relationships I made by having that common ground. And when you find that common ground, whatever it is, there's really no end to what happens. So I'm in the right place with my snow country.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I'm going to go counterclockwise on my screen, so you don't know who I'm going to pick next because you don't know what my screen looks like. So Jane, if you will unmute and tell us a little bit about, where you are, what kind of weather you've got right now, and what's that making possible for you?
I'm Jane Garson, a leadership service provider in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The other side of the border. I've been nervous about whether I'll be crossing a border anytime in the near future. Changing plans, perhaps. I am looking out on a lovely sunny day, but they're predicting snow to start later this afternoon, and enough that it's going to make it possible for me to be glad that I'm staying in this evening anyway for a singing lesson.
Nice.
Won't mind being indoors if there's snow swirling around, besides the temperature dropped quite a bit today. It's been a weird week with freezing rain, ice, you name it.
It's pretty amazing, yeah.
And it's supposed to be warm by Saturday, so maybe I'll get back out on the trail after all.
By trail, if you didn't catch any of that, I believe Jane is talking about riding her horse.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Who has not been ridden in a while because it has been far too icy at the farm. I can't even get to the trails because it's too icy to lead the horses even to anywhere to mount and ride out. And that may still be the case, in which case I'll watch my horse being an absolute idiot, running like mad around an arena, kicking and bucking and having fun, because if it's slippery out, they love to come in where there's good footing.
Oh, nice. Sounds like fun. How about you, Kelly? Where are you beaming in from? Just like a one-liner of who you are or background, and what does your weather make possible for you?
So I'm joining you from upstate New York.
Where?
I am in Ithaca, so I am right in the middle of snow country.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch where you are. Where are you, Kelly?
I'm in Ithaca, New York.
Ithaca,
upstate New York.
Yeah.
And how it's affecting me is I tend to do a lot of early morning meetings, and this morning school was on a 2-hour delay. So the 3 other ladies I was meeting, we all have kids who are in school. So we're all happily rescheduling for some other time.
And what is that making possible for you right now that you had to reschedule it?
Well, it's creating some time for me to join you all on this call. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
So, yeah. Unpredictable weather creates opportunity.
Yep. So glad you're with us. How about you, Sean?
Sean Stevens in Wilmington, Delaware. The weather in Delaware, it was an early morning snow, so that disrupted everybody's schedule because nobody never knows what to do when it starts out 3 o'clock in the morning, and whether they need to shut schools down and work schedules and meetings and stuff like that. So the advantage for me, though, is that it provided opportunity to catch up on information and research kinds of stuff related to the projects that I'm working on, rather than putting out fires and attending meetings and making phone calls. So that's always a good thing to get that research caught up on.
Oh, that's great. That's good. And if I'm Susan Detweiler, and I am also in Wilmington, Delaware, where it snowed this morning. Yesterday it was 65 degrees, and today the high is going to be 38, and I believe that the high was this morning when it was snowing, or something like that, or it's going down. But while I work from home and a snow day doesn't really make much of a difference for me, and I don't have kids at home, the meeting that I had scheduled for 10 o'clock, I got told that, oh, we're all working from home today, so I'm not leaving my house. So can we reschedule? I said, sure, which gave me more time to, as Sean said, catch up on reading. I have a whole folder of things that I call saved reading, which about 5 of the 25 articles actually have been read. So I'm kind of working my way through that. But I like thinking of what does a change in plan make possible. And I think that that's one of the things that Creating the Future has given me, the concept of here's where we are right now. What does this make possible, instead of looking backwards at what's wrong or what's bad about it? And yeah, you're going to vent and yell and scream or whatever about whatever the bad thing is. And then you say, okay, what does this make possible? So that's why I started out that way today, because our lives got changed depending on the weather, and everything makes us possible, makes different things possible. So for those of you who are watching the recording and not here, we miss you. When we post the video up on our blog, please write any comments in, and we'll respond and be part of the conversation that way. Throughout history, people have had conversations with people who have come before them by writing commentary on that, and other people write commentary up on that. So we want to continue that tradition of continuing to comment on each other's work and learn from each other. Creating the Future has talks about causality a lot. Every moment in time is caused by everything that came before it, and therefore this moment is part of what's creating our future. And if we look at what do we want to be the absolute best, if everything's 100% successful in our world, what does it look like? We stop and think, what conditions need to be in place for that to happen? And then we say, what preconditions have to be in place for that to happen? And what actions do we have to take in order to do it? And I'm saying this as a prelude to talking about where we are right now. So I'm sharing the screen. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Tell me if you're not seeing something that's blue and purple and red. All right, good. So in our first meeting, we talked about what is the highest potential outcome. What could the Facebook group be for all of the nonprofit consultants, for all of the community benefit organization consultants? And if that happened, what does that make possible? And if that happens, what does that make possible, and for whom? So what we did in that first meeting, we came up with the idea of the ultimate potential of this group is that by bringing out the best in its participants, we can in turn bring out the best in our clients, our communities, our country, and ultimately the world. Lofty goals, but hey, let's start big and see where it takes us. If the highest potential for the group is that, who are these people? Who are the whoms that we're talking about? We talked about the consultants who are actually in the group. That's who we're affecting. We're affecting the organizations that we work with, and within those, we're affecting the executive directors, the board members, staff, clients, volunteers. We're affecting the community. In essence, we are affecting every adult and every child in our communities, and they in turn are affecting the future. So that was a lovely 2-hour conversation to get to that point of bringing it all the way up to that highest level of where we are. So the second meeting was saying, if that's the case, if that's what our ultimate outcome is, what do we need to put in place in order for that to happen? So first we started talking about being more explicit about who they are in the group. So we narrowed from everybody in the world to talking about specifically the people in our group. We're generous givers. We're advocates for nonprofit organizations. We want to help people have better outcomes. Everybody in the group in general we're a bunch of learners, that we're always learning from each other. We value professional development. Everybody in the group seems to be relationship oriented. We want to meet the client where they are, as opposed to being authoritarian and saying, this is what it should be. And we have a mindset of possibility, which is why we actually look at what does it make possible, which is awesome. But then we realized that that could be said about almost anybody. They don't have to be a consultant to be that. So what differentiates the participants in this group? Let me get out of stop sharing so you can actually see me. Hi. What differentiates the participants in the group is that we all intend to generate income from our work. Coaching, consulting, contracting to nonprofit organizations. And we have a wide range of different expertise in the group. So if that's the case, getting more narrow about who the whom's are, it's all of us, every single one of the 5 of us and everybody who's watching the recording, and anybody who isn't watching the recording but is still in the nonprofit community benefit organization group. What do we need to get out of the group to be able to have that great outcome? What needs to be in place? And we all came up with lots of different ideas. We talked about things like, if you recall, we talked about things like, oh, I want to have a meetup with people. I want to say, I want to talk about this one topic. Let's do that. Or I want to bring in an expert on something so we can hear from them about this. I want to know that I can find this information because I want to find all the other people who are in my field and talk about things that are specific to that particular thing. So what it sounded like, and the agreement was, what we want is to be able to tap into the expertise that's in the group, tap into the group for whatever it is that we need. And we don't know what that is because each person is an individual. And what is important to Sean that he needs is not necessarily important to me or to Kelly. We might need something different. So one of the conditions for us being able to be at our highest potential is for us to be able to tap into the expertise in the group. Where we are right now is becoming a little more explicit about what conditions need to be in place for us to be able to achieve whatever it is we want to do. And going back to that chart, I can show you where we are right now. We're actually walking our way all the way through this this planning matrix. Share screen, there we are. We're now here. What's it gonna take? And then we'll get to what steps do we take in order to create those conditions. So we said we need to have facilitators, hosts who are comfortable and inviting. We need to make a welcoming and inviting environment. Participants who are committed and show up. We need to have explicit education on how different ways of asking questions can create different kinds of responses. We want participants to feel empowered. So that's where we are right now. We have done a lot of work in the 4.5 hours that have gotten us to this point. 2 hours in the first meeting, 2 hours in the last meeting, and now we're 20 minutes into this meeting. And I'm going to ask this question. If what we're looking for is participants to be empowered, what can we put in place? What do people need to know, to feel, to believe, to have an infrastructure? What needs to be in the infrastructure for people to feel empowered to take on whatever it is they want to take on within the group? Hi, Bruce.
Hi. Sorry to be late.
Oh, you've missed a whole wonderful discussion. We're done.
Good. My work here is finished.
Bruce, just quickly, where are you calling in from?
I am calling in from Hamilton, New Jersey, not far from Princeton, about halfway between New York and Philadelphia.
And what kind of weather do you have, and what's that making possible for you today?
We had about 5 inches of snow. It is heavier and wetter than average. And the reason I was late is I just spent 40 minutes and shoveled all of it, so by hand.
I got snow here. You can come here too.
Okay, be right over.
So where we are right now is the collective group, the 20 some odd people that have actually been in on all of these meetings, representing the 500 plus people in our group, have come up with the idea that we want to be able to tap into the strengths of the group, tap into each other's knowledge, tap into whatever it is we need. And the question at hand is, what will make it possible for people to tap into the knowledge and expertise of the group?
Well, I can start by saying we have to know each other. So people do introductions, but you can't find those by the time you need them, or can't find the 6 people who might specialize in the area you wanted to talk about. We were talking, I think, about better mapping of who's there and what they have to offer to the group, so that when something comes up, we're not searching forever through past threads.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I think Jane was right where we start is it's always about the relationships and never about the thing. And to that point of, we understand the power of a tool for Facebook in what it offers for groups can be organizing and finding stuff like people interested in like things, but then to build on that of what does it mean to be in this group all together? And what does it take to create more of this? Because this is where you get to connect as humans and bring your whole person in the room. And we'll get to the thing and to the doing. But I imagine happy hours and whatever they are going to look like. But regular meetups of, hey, who else is in here? What's going on? And that would also take individuals willing to host and to invite and to nurture and welcome. Like those essential roles is, what does someone need to know and feel and have to even say yes to show up at the happy hour? And that would take more folks interested in, hey, I'll reach out to so-and-so because I don't know her yet. And I see that as an opportunity for a relationship. And it's no different than when we think about, well, who else is going to be at the party? Will there be anyone there I know? Like the normal social norms that all of us feel apply here as well. Is it might be knowing, I'll be there. I can't wait to see you. And I'm going to introduce you and tell you everyone why I'm excited you're here. Because I know this is the first time you're coming into a Zoom. Mm-hmm. And just even mentioning Zoom as far as a condition for success is people need to feel comfortable with the tool. So that also takes people and a willingness for folks to be Sherpas. I'll help you out and we can do a test run on Zoom before you step in so you feel comfortable that day.
Including hosting or access to ability to host, since who knows which people will decide to get together when. And it's easy to do one-on-one, but it's not as easy to do for a group.
So one of the preconditions for people being able to get together is an infrastructure, technology that is accessible and taught.
Mhm.
And if you're going to have something that is taught, you need teachers or facilitators.
Mhm.
And if you're going to have teachers, facilitators, since I actually am one on this group and Rebecca is one on another group, we can tell you that we need more than one. You need more than 3 or 4 facilitators, particularly. We currently have 4 facilitators in our group. There's myself, Mark Pittman, Rebecca Henderson, and Mary Kalane. Is that how it's pronounced? I always forgotten how to pronounce it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Mary Kalane. There's the 4 of us, and that was great when we were 200 people, 250 people. We're now over 500, and we are all on the East Coast.
Mm.
And so when we talk about needing facilitators, we need many facilitators, possibly who have accepted different roles,
Mhm.
but maybe cross roles as well, because if one of us is out sick, the other one will pick it up. But perhaps we need people from different time zones as facilitators.
Or people willing to stay up late and
Yeah.
facilitate elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, you want night owls.
That would be me.
I mean, we do have people who are in Australia in the group. We're
And Hawaii.
at Hawaii. Yes, we're actually doing a class using Zoom where I have to put the times for the class in 4 different time zones every time I send an email out. And the only reason it's not 5 is because there's nobody from the central time zone now in the class.
Well, I think that does speak to, Susan, is everyone having the awareness of all of us. Because if we're thinking about all of us, there are those, this is talking specifically to time zones. There are sweet spots in time zones that can work for folks. I may be drinking wine, Bruce may be having a beer, but there are, we can find spots knowing at the same
And
time
Joyce
that,
will be having coffee.
yeah. What do you got? Is that chocolate stout beer? I thought.
No, it's not. It's white chocolate seltzer. It's bubbles, water, and flavor.
No alcohol.
No.
Later.
No such luck, yeah.
Later.
Yeah. So everyone has an awareness of whom we all are, so that as we plan and do things together, we don't inadvertently leave people out because we're not acknowledging that or it's completely inadvertent that we're leaving people out. So what would make it possible for everyone in the group, in the entire group, to be aware of everyone in the group? And Jane, what you said about mapping.
Yeah, I meant that in many ways. Relationships, places, things that you're interested in talking about. Not necessarily what you do for a living, but what you actually want to talk to others about.
And I think there's also I don't know what I want to talk about, but I'd like to get to know people. So opportunities for very, very open spaces. So creating and holding spaces where the intention is, we all believe there's tremendous value in getting to know each other. And we know there's going to be something on the other side of that. There's going to be a ton of things on the other side of that.
But that means people need to be confident enough to sometimes to set up that one-on-one discussion and know that their invitation is going to be welcomed. So that's another part of the facilitation, is trying to help people make that step to say, hey, I don't know, Bruce, want to get together on Zoom next week? We're kind of used to it in the group, some of us, and some of the people in many of those 500 plus have never done that.
Jane, I love what you just said, that people need to feel comfortable in reaching out. What if we all sat for a moment and thought about what makes it possible for people? What do people need to feel, believe, know, have in order for them to feel like they can reach out?
I think the feeling of I'm willing to try something new, because that could be something very new for an individual, and that there's a whole spectrum of what looks comfortable to me may not look comfortable to Kelly. So also knowing that there's a myriad of ways that you can participate, and we still honor and delight in the quiet thinker who's in this group. So it's not get on the on-ramp, everyone, but it's continuing to offer so many different ways for people to participate, knowing that lots of people are reading and gobbling up stuff, and we may not even know you're here. So it's continuing to honor quiet thinkers as well as those who are like the all-you-can-eat smorgasbord folks.
Yeah.
And I think one of the maybe two of the fundamental things are a feeling of safety. People have to feel that they're not going to be attacked, critiqued, judged, that their ideas will be heard and respected. There can be respectful disagreement and dialogue, and I hope there will be, because that's how you generate novelty and change. But in the beginning, I think if we want people, particularly those uncomfortable with this kind of thing, they have to feel welcome, they have to feel safe and respected.
I think there's also a mindset that goes along with it in terms of participating in a group such as this, and it's not just seeing the value in terms of expertise. I mean, for me, I'm going to what's the common purpose that we have as a group? What's the movement we're trying to create? I just because of where I am in my career, I feel comfortable enough to reach out through Facebook to consultants to ask questions and respond to stuff and things like that. I look locally at I participated in the Association of Fundraising Professionals for 15 years. Certainly the membership fee alone is a reason for me not to participate, I think. But because of the nature of Delaware and the close contact with individuals, that networking opportunity, that there's a whole bunch of stuff that I get out of that, and that I take it upon myself. I have found, as I've interviewed people and brought younger people along, not everybody feels this automatic attraction to being part of a group. And so I think that, making sure that through Facebook and through these kinds of web contacts, are we tapping into enough reasons for individuals to participate? I mean, I'll be honest, I like the fact there's a group out there that has expertise that I can tap into. But I'm also looking at this group, what is it that our purpose is? And I hope we have some shared values about how to move communities forward in stuff, not just individuals, but communities. And so, to the extent that I feel that that's something we're looking upon as a profession of consultants and human services and other organizations, I think, are we tapping into enough reasons? And I suggest that expertise is one, but I don't think that that's necessarily even the primary focus. I think it's just one of the focus areas.
I think, I saw a couple of nods there, Jane, Rebecca. I saw some nods there, and Bruce. If one of you wants to elaborate on what Sean said.
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking as I listened to Sean is, who are the people that we would like to reach to? Who are our ideal or desired customers, to use that word broadly, or participants? And not customers in the transactional business sense, but who are the
participants in the group?
Yes, who are the people that we would like to participate in this effort? And we've heard in these other comments, Sean's and Rebecca's, People may have different personalities and styles, and they may know different kinds of things and may be willing and able to do different things in different ways. So what are the channels and what are the technologies and what are the ways that they would like to be available to them? So can we offer things in the ways that would make it possible for the greatest number of folks to find their way into this, to find their way to others of similar interest or novel interest and knowledge that they might want to acquire? Can we build those bridges for them to cross and come in?
Yeah, I like that, the human focus, because it's yes, folks may have areas that they delight in doing work in or years of experience. Though if that language comes forward, we are not modeling the values of the whole person and honoring a whole person in the room. So that even sets the tone for the convenings or conversations of, it's about everyone. This is just for grant writers. What could be possible if? What's on the other side of grant writing? Like what do awesome communities look like, and how are grants and support? Like the language that we use will be huge because it will set the tone. So if we're going to structure things as job titles, that's reinforcing the message that I think many don't believe in. Is this? Yes, there could be topical areas, but the invitation to all is so essential in the intentionality in the language we use, knowing that many folks do work outside of systems, maybe coming in as a consultant. This is your system. You are co-creating this and co-leading this group together is a different dynamic that may be very new to folks and feel a little like, you still have all the assumptions in your head that you're not even realizing.
And I think that some of that, we are so conditioned that to think that, to automatically respond that if we're in a group that we perceive as being, this is a professional group, that when people ask you about yourself, we talk about our work. I loved what Rebecca did this morning when I said, what does the snow make possible? And she started talking about her community. And I love that. And Jane, you did some of that as well when you were talking about, going out and watching your horse playing in the snow. Whereas honestly, I came back and said, just like, Sean did, what it makes possible is more professional reading as opposed to sleeping in.
I'd like to talk more about what Sean said on values, because usually when I'm dealing with groups, that's one of the early conversations is, have we articulated values? Do we have the same understanding of what we mean by some of the values? I don't think we've ever had that conversation.
I don't know if we've had it in the larger group, Jane, but our very first meeting talked about who are we? And we talked about how we are people who know that we are affecting not just ourselves and the organizations that we work for, but through them, we are building a better world.
Oh, so, absolutely. I was there, but what do we mean by better? Each of us may have a very different definition of what better looks like.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that we could come to that kind of agreement here. It's very helpful to know, to have the kind of community where we can talk about it and sometimes talk to people whose values, who define a better world differently than I might, is part of the benefit sometimes of being in this group, is to learn the reasons for thinking differently, what it means if you define better this way and that way. Well, how does that affect the work that we do, and how does it affect our relationships with each other? We still need to be respectful, to regard each other as whole human beings, even if we might disagree on one aspect, like how education gets delivered.
So Jane and everybody, if a member of our group wanted to have that conversation, what can we put in place? What do we need? What conditions will set us up? And by conditions, it's not solely how people feel, but actually infrastructural things as well, because having these conversations is wonderful. What can we put in place in terms of infrastructure so that we can actually make that conversation possible? What can we put in place so that, as Rebecca said, an invitation can go out to the entire group that says, we are going to be talking about the granting process. We'd love anybody to join us. You're welcome, because we're looking at the granting process as it might affect communities in general, or something like that. But what can we put in place so that any member of our group can tap into the collective wisdom and experience and beings of anybody else in the group? Because right now, we've got a fabulous group. We've got a community, which is absolutely awesome. And every so often, somebody will post something that says, I've been around here I've been reading everything for a long time, and this is the first time I'm posting. And they might have been a member for 4 years, and they're finally feeling like they can step into this. And somebody else I'll talk to, I was just talking to somebody who said, I love everything that goes on in the group, but I subcontract to somebody who's also a member of the group, and I'm sometimes afraid to post about a different project that I'm working on that's not for them. So we're seeing people from that whole spectrum. What can we put in place that allows anybody to step forward and tap into the wisdom of the group?
I think one of the biggest assets we have is this is a program of creating the future. We have catalytic thinking practices and basically it's about how does a group want to be when we be together. And if we are focused on bringing out the best in each other, ourselves, the world, any situation we have as a consultant or otherwise, there is a repeatable framework, questions we can ask that become the rhythm and the tone where relationships are embedded in every conversation. Because guess what? We check-ins, awesomes, stories, there's such deep intentionality in that. Closing every meeting with reflection builds community. So we have a framework, a gorgeous approach that will bring out the best in everyone, no matter what the conversation is. And it's also the guide for, what would Kelly need if she does want to start X, whatever X is. So it's the same framework that would guide us in ensuring we have covered all the human-focused conditions to get the result Kelly wants to see. Because it gets back to what is meaningful and comfortable for everyone to step into.
And I guess I would take it beyond. I mean, Jane came up with some really good questions before, and Rebecca, identified. We've said that this whole catalytic process is about the right questions, how to put that into action. Maybe one way to put that in action is we have a lot of questions, through Facebook on very procedural, mechanical, job-related things, about grants and stuff like that. But maybe it's somebody leading a discussion for a sustained period of time, 1 week, or I don't know, and that discussion is, you said, what makes a good community? Imagine that as an open-ended question. Yes. But one person is designated to sustain that for a week, respond to people, keep it going. I'm always amazed when I'm teaching a course and we use discussion boards, how there's a certain cluster of students that will maintain discussions long after I want to cease giving them corrections. So I think there's, it's those questions, what are the questions we want to ask, for catalytic thinking, and really sustaining that. And I don't know what the magical time period is. It seems like, sustaining a discussion for a week before moving on to something may be a good way to start. And identifying individuals who want to lead that discussion for weeks so that they're pushing people and things like that.
What would it take to have that sustained conversation? I think, Sean, you actually articulated one of them, is 1 or 2 people who take on the job of the role of facilitator of that conversation. I don't know if you've noticed that the facilitators in this group and in the other group that is a function of creating the future, anybody who posts something gets a response. it may be a response saying, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe so-and-so does, but every single person who posts anything gets a response. That's one of the jobs that we've taken on as facilitators. So it does take people to do it.
I think there's a real opportunity as far as what people need to feel comfortable if we want to model and share catalytic thinking, that there's an opportunity to have a live program, a Zoom or whatever around you, because people, there's different levels of understanding of catalytic thinking. So a session and multiple sessions, whatever it's going to take to get more and more people who want to participate in live conversations, understanding catalytic thinking, like an overview of what it is. It's already infused into everything that's been going on in this space. And I know we speak of that. That's why you feel this way in this group, because there's intention in the practices of Susan and the other facilitators, but really elevate it to, so what is catalytic thinking? And then knowing that whoever comes into the room, juicy relationships are going to happen, because we're all going to start by hearing each other's stories. Then we're going to maybe dig into content, and we're going to close with reflection. So it becomes kind of a rhythm and a pattern that will feel familiar over time, no matter the topic that people are stepping into.
And I love that, Rebecca. One of the reasons I shared the screen with what that pattern looks like is to illustrate that we're actually doing all of that. We're doing that. We started out with the whole idea is, what are we aiming for whom, and then travel down from the for whom's into the participants in the group. And from there, what do we need to put in place for us as participants in the group? And now we're getting actually into the very tactical things of that we will be able to take actions to create. And I love, Rebecca, that you brought up having explicit conversations about catalytic thinking and the processes and why the group feels the way it does.
And that answers to one of the conditions you mentioned earlier about people having more knowledge about how to ask different types of questions.
Yeah, I'm calling that pulling back the curtain on why it works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's in such a way that it's individuals can take, experiment, model, bring this into their life, to their kitchen table tonight. What is it I can practice with? How can that consultant conversation go differently? And then come back to the group and share. Here's what I've been playing with. Here's what I've been noticing. So it takes the conversation and puts it on steroids when people are playing with catalytic thinking.
And that's pulling back the curtain on things that are actually happening right now, because several people have commented on, I love the questions that I get. When I pose a question, I love the questions I get. Or your questions always make me think. And occasionally people who are new to the group are taken aback by the questions that they get when they post something.
Yeah, they just expected answers.
They expected answers instead of the depths of the questions. Whereas if we're explicit about the fact that we use these questions, the fact that we use these questions and why we use these questions, that it's part of the catalytic thing, that it's part of creating the future, that can make it more comfortable for people to understand why they're getting those responses when they first post something. Being explicit about it.
And then to see in the group their success. Look what that question made possible, and all the stuff that came out of that by somebody asking something as simple as, Bruce, can you tell us more about what you're thinking here, instead of just hammering off ideas and advice. So if it works in here in this safe and nurturing group, what will it take for me to feel comfortable to play with that question out there, wherever my there is? So it also gives you real-time learning to, it's not magic. Look what happened when something as simple as tell me more was asked to that thread. versus immediately telling the person what to do when we knew we didn't have the whole context to their story.
What else can we put in place so that people feel like they can do whatever they want in the group? Invite other people on a one-on-one, create a meeting, start a philosophical thread.
They may need to see it modeled by others. So not planting seeds, but to see someone else doing that and like, oh, I could try that too. Or even understanding the many different ways to catalyze stuff in this place, even to suggest, interested in doing X, we're here to support that. Interested in doing Y, we can support that too.
I'd love to know what Kelly's thinking. She's paying such rapt attention. She's,
Yeah.
can you share anything about what you're thinking, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm probably the newest one to the group, it feels like, just in the last month or so. Can you
I'm so glad you're here, Kelly, because this group is for people who are new as well as people who've been around, the legacy members.
We need the fresh eyes. Just from talking jargon or making assumptions.
And I feel like I've been following the group. You know, I'm not reading every single post, but it seems pretty friendly and welcoming. And I think, you know, people will post things when they feel ready to. But I really didn't know that there were the 4 folks doing the facilitating. So when I'm a project manager, so I think a lot about expectations. Maybe just, you know, the person who invited me to the group kind of gave me a little prep and said, you know, I'm going to invite you and I'll introduce you. Feel free to chime in and introduce yourself. And, you know, just participate as much as you feel comfortable doing. But I came into the group without any real knowledge or background in catalytic thinking. So I feel that part of my hesitation of doing more posts is I'm not exactly sure what the expectation is around the questioning. Because there are a lot of things that I would like to ask of this group, but are there certain questions or certain lines of inquiry that you prefer to focus on? So I'll give you an example. I'm going to be in New York City at the end of the month. I would like to know who else in this group works in New York City, and I'd be happy to invite people to meet up for coffee on the days that I'm down there.
Yes.
Awesome.
That is awesome, and it's something that we've definitely seen people do in the group. It happens, and I'm saying, giving you the answer right now, but then we're going to use that to figure out, as a new person, what would have made it possible for you to feel like you could put that out to the group. But the answer, Kelly, is yes. If you want to post that and say, I'm going to be in New York on these X couple of days, anybody want to meet up? Definitely the kind of thing that goes on. And also, if people are going to conferences, I'm going to XYZ conference, anybody else going to be there? You know, let me know. We'll meet up. And in the files, there actually is a list of members of the community who have put themselves up there with where they are and what their specialties are, and it's searchable.
Okay, where
Not everybody does it. It's in the file folders. It's in the files on the top when you're on Facebook.
It's searchable, but we don't make a point of letting everybody know it's there and what it's called.
And therein, Jane, is one of our conditions.
Yes.
Preconditions for success is
It maybe needs to be right in the about, or a pin.
or a mention of a link to it in the about.
Yeah,
I
mean the link to it.
Files about people.
It's been one of the huge benefits, Kelly, of this
Yeah.
this group is that anytime you're traveling or going to a conference, it's likely that you'll find somebody from the group, and then it's
Great.
wonderful, and we get hugs.
Kelly, I want to thank you for raising expectations, because I think it's huge. And how often in life are we not given the roadmap? And what could be possible if we had the roadmap of here's what you can expect, and at the same time, we have all the systems and infrastructure in place to meet those expectations, like how whoever invited you to the group, but we know that isn't always the situation that happens for everyone, but they told you, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to introduce you, you'll share your story. So what systems need to be in place that no matter how someone or when someone joins, or even someone who's been in there for 2 years and isn't quite sure what's going on, of understanding what the group is all about and your expectations. Also of there is no permission, in the sense of, do I have permission, where we've often lived in systems where we feel like I don't have permission to do that or ask that. But how do we elevate the language and intentionality of the group there to share, here's what you can expect when you join. People may be contacting you because they want to get to know you. Just even giving a list of things that you'll be hearing from other humans, because the group is all about bringing people together, but also noting it's whatever you feel comfortable. So you're not obligated to, it's not like we're nurturing you to more engagement. It's whatever engagement looks like for each person. That having that right out there for folks to know, here's what you can expect. Here are lots of different ways to participate, links to great handy files and resources that already exist.
And that sounds like it needs to be a file that new people get told about. And in my music hobby group, anybody coming to one of the Phil conventions for the first time, there's usually a newbie page that says, here's kind of how the weekend's going to be and what you can expect.
And it's a yes, and it's that, that resource and a human. And that comes back to more folks.
I'm so glad, Kelly, you did have a buddy who brought you in and explained some of what you can expect. And you can't always explain everything up front, or you can overwhelm people and drive them away. So you have to figure out how to best do that.
And Kelly, your experience of not knowing what I can ask is not unusual. It's definitely not unusual. And I wonder how many people we don't know experienced that. I know of a few others who experienced it, and now Kelly, but how many others that are brought into the group don't know that? So I'm really glad that you're here reminding us of this.
And let's be honest, there are some things that you need permission for. If we're going to brag about our business, there's a Friday brag basket. You don't do it the rest of the week. A new person's not going to know that.
And changing language on that, Jane, it feels like we need permission for it, but those guidelines actually grew out of the members of the group. And we use those as guidelines. And I think one of the things about creating the future is that rules are not imposed. They grow out of the agreements that are made by the people who are in the group.
Yeah, I'm just talking about sharing them with new people.
Yes, absolutely, Jane. That whole idea of making sure that what these guidelines are and the rationale behind them.
Yeah.
Pull back the curtain.
Pull back the curtain, as you know. And I don't know if you've noticed that many times when the people who open the brag basket, and by the way, anybody can open the brag basket. It doesn't have to be one of the facilitators. Many times it's not the facilitator. But when a facilitator puts it up, usually there is at least 1 or 2 sentences that says, in order to keep this a non-self-promotion zone, we don't talk about ourselves during the week except in this one thread. So that creates that gives an explanation for it. So I love where this is going, is that we pull back the curtain on why it works and how it works, and how people can step into taking on something, taking on a role.
I'm thinking from Kelly, it makes me think about lunch buddies. You know, when you have to go to the lunchroom and you don't know anyone, it's sure great to have a lunch buddy. So, and that's even as we welcome new people, but even letting folks in the group know these are people in this group, and it's the invitation's open to anyone who wants to step forward to, you know, meet up with folks, be lunch buddies. It feels like lot nicer to have, and then you ask, who are the folks who have been kind of very active in the group? Would this be something meaningful to them to reach out to someone else? Because sometimes it's not even realizing, oh, I didn't even think about that, or, you know, that's something that I'd like to step into.
Oh, that mind blown. One of the things the facilitator's been talking about is that with 500 plus people, 4 isn't enough, and especially if they're all on the East Coast, or daytimers on the East Coast, Bruce. But to ask somebody to be a facilitator could be daunting.
Mm-hmm.
But to offer as an initial option of, how'd you like to be a lunch buddy, or whatever we decide to call them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would you be interested in being available to be welcoming to people? And then once they're in, and from there they may decide that, yeah, I could be a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
And the more facilitators there are, the easier it is and the less work it is.
I like that idea of people serving as sort of host, guide, welcoming partner, whatever you want to call it. I think that's a really positive way to help people get acclimated, oriented, included.
I think that speaks to what is facilitating. It's actually bringing out the best in each other, in the situation, in the environment. So all of these roles, lunch buddy, Sherpa, are facilitating. We're all bringing out the best in each other, and there's a whole range of ways you can step in to bring out the best in yourself and someone else in this community.
I'd like to follow this one down. I don't think it's a rabbit hole, but I'd like to follow it down a path of what roles would need to be filled, so that we you know, with this conversation, we're identifying the role, identifying the things that we would like to have people doing in order to facilitate this group. So we talked about the lunch buddies, or however we want to call it, like lunch buddy would be a welcomer.
Mm-hmm. Welcome sort of implies newcomer, but I actually think we have a larger population of lurkers that we need to be sure we address in whatever actions we take to create the conditions for them to be as active as they'd like to be.
And one language thing, because we've been working on scaling our little fledgling catalytic thinking kind of big tent Facebook group, is because lurker just kind of, it's a yucky kind of feeling and creepy. So quiet thinker is where I landed, because this person is quietly absorbing and thinking and reflecting. It's just is a welcoming way to speak of them, even in context to them, to say quiet lurkers out there, or quiet thinkers, you're welcome here.
I kind of feel like, you know, it's the participants formerly known as Prince, formerly known as lurkers, the quiet participants, the absorbers. What other roles? I can tell you what some of the roles that the facilitators are fulfilling right now, to give you an idea. One is, and it's not a very hard role, because we've been going along for so long that it's like everybody has absorbed this already. But if somebody does post about their own business outside of the brag basket, in the back channel, one of the facilitators will reach out and, you know, gently ask them to remove it and wait until Friday for the brag basket. And sometimes if it's like on the fence, we're not sure, we back channel with the other facilitators and say, what do you think of this? So that's one of the roles that the facilitators role. Another role would be, like Sean said, somebody who steps forward to shepherd a big question conversation. What do we want to call that person? Shepherd? Facilitator?
Navigator.
Well, it's like, not that I'm imagining if it's, I think of the lovely tradition on Friday where everyone's excited to share all kinds of joys and excitement. It can set the tone for the week if it's this week's host, or it's like a Monday.
Ooh,
Monday they open up this rich conversation for the week, and then perhaps on Friday, yes, and is we can close out with reflections, or creating the community also via the group, kind of the posts in there as well.
And that role can easily switch from person to person. Who has time this week to be on twice a day to make sure that the conversation's continuing?
I think host is an excellent word.
I like that word, yeah. The Monday host.
And sometimes it can be, I think, appropriately self-serving for somebody to step forward and be a host. It was just a minor example. I remember a couple of months ago, somebody raised a question about something about collective impact. And that could have easily been a discussion opened up, to host for a week. It could be very self-serving for that person, which is fine. But it was a broader question. It wasn't about, how to do an annual giving campaign or something like that. It was really, community oriented or something like that. So part of it too, whether it falls on the facilitator or somebody else that sees something and say, how'd you like to host that next week as a topic? Or
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to capture that. Facility can identify a big question from the regular.
As long as we're hosting in order to bring out the highest potential of the people in the group, there's no harm in gaining skills and confidence in ourselves while we're at it. If we're adding to our own store of knowledge, that's just fine, as long as we focus on the overall purpose.
A question of something like, what is collective impact? How can we actually identify it? And the conversation can go in all different many ways. I like that.
And I think it's also then in the what would it take for that gets back to people understanding the intentionality behind catalytic thinking framework and the questions. So whether you're the host or the participant, and that doesn't mean, I'm not in any way saying people cannot participate, but it would be very helpful for people to have an understanding in the why behind the questions. And because if someone's hosting and popping out a question, that sets the tone for what happens next. So whether you're a host or anyone in the group and interested in learning more about catalytic thinking, it feeds into this and to anything that people step into, any role.
I think the phrase you just used about interested in learning more is absolutely critical. If you're hosting on a topic where you think you are the expert and have all this ton of in-depth knowledge, you're going to get defensive if it's criticized. Maybe that's not the topic for you. Collective impact being a good example. It has very strong proponents. It has very strong critics.
But that gets to what will the weekly hosting make possible? Like what's on the other side of all of these things? Like the intentionality of what we're hoping this or any other new program or conversation starter will make possible, and what will it take?
So what does hosting a big question make possible?
Practicing catalytic thinking.
That's one.
Helping to catalyze thinking for other people and allow new stuff to emerge by way of experience. It isn't just about the words. Increasingly, I find, especially the way the world is now, words are not necessarily enough to get through to some people, and I don't mean just because of politics. But increasingly, I see that it flows from experience. What joint and collective experience can we have such that our individual perception and interpretation of meaning then catalyzes the thinking and the words and the possibility that come from that?
Would engage more voices.
Some of those big questions, we have people who are new to the consulting practice. Some people who are new to nonprofits. And they may feel like they don't have anything to offer when it comes to how do I do this in my practice type of questions. But having a big picture question is a place for conversation, which is not to say that they don't have things to offer in those other places, but they may feel like they don't. But this offers a way to participate, to get comfortable participating.
Mm-hmm. And if we've gotten to know them because we were their lunch buddy, maybe if they're new to consulting, they've been clients. Instead, host a wonderful conversation about how it feels to be a client.
Ooh, that could be a really interesting conversation.
And we've been consulting too long to host that one, probably.
And, we say big question for, hosting something. And it could be very professional oriented too. I mean, I don't want to just say it has to be these broad things. I mean, you could do a whole week on, what's a good what's a good framework for strategic planning. I mean, imagine the diversity of opinions and stuff that could come out of that, and models and frameworks that people have never thought of before. And yet that could be very focused for a big cluster of consultants.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to pull a Bob Dole on that one. It depends. But then the question is, depends on what? But I like that because those, you could do a whole week on what's a good model for strategic planning. And it could be, and it could also be a good question for something like what we're doing right now, a conversation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then people can even share their screen and say, for example, here's a model that I used, and learn from each other.
Oh, I would hope that something like, that was a good model because of this group or these conditions. This might be another good model for this group. That
kind of conversation. Yeah.
That, maybe there's somebody that's in practice in the same model for 25 years. I doubt it, but and they said,
"Oh, you'd be surprised."
I never thought about that. And whether that's because of different kinds of missions that they have, or different populations, or different generational board members that they're dealing with, or something like that. So I think that. So I think that, at some point along the way, there are certain guidelines that could be given to somebody hosting, say, these are catalytic questions. These are the general outcomes or objectives that we're looking for in a week-long conversation. Not to be overly prescriptive, but because that's good training for the person hosting it too.
And you're also identifying possibly another role that needs to be filled if we want to try to ensure that there is at least one such question every Monday. Somebody needs to coordinate that.
Coordinator of the weekly question.
Or several questions or whatever.
Yeah. So
there's at least one.
So what other roles are there? We've got lunch buddies, you've got facilitators, you've got big question hosts, or week-long question of the week hosts. How's that? Question of the week hosts, coordinator for the weekly question.
Mm-hmm. The sidekick, who is basically, tell me more. Watching to keep that kind of conversation going without being a major contributor of content.
So tell me more, Jane. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's part of what the facilitators are doing now to make sure everybody gets some kind of answer.
Okay.
When they post something, almost always the first thing the facilitator does is ask another question.
True.
And it doesn't have to be the 4 current facilitators that are checking to make sure there's always some kind of, can you tell me more about that in the discussion? So a host really appreciates, I'm thinking back to the Twitter chats, for example. It was wonderful if there was more than one of us on the group, so that so the person who was trying to guide the overall didn't have to also be saying, oh, and welcome so-and-so, and thank you for coming, and tell me more about this, and can you explain what you meant by that? And whatever. Somebody who's paying really close attention.
So it's a host and sidekick for the week-long question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Co-host, moderator.
Right.
Yeah.
I put down sidekick. We're good. It'll get changed.
Any of those terms would be fine. Co-host, co-moderator, but I just thought we might try to use something less typical. So that people say, what do you mean by that? And open a conversation.
Kelly, what we have on the 6 people on the screen right now is Rebecca and I believe, Jane definitely has been with Creating the Future the longest. And you were there from when it all started with the Twitter chats, right?
Oh, way before that.
Way before that. A listserv.
Back when Dimitri and Hildy were still running a for-profit called Help for Nonprofits and Tribes, and thinking about setting up a nonprofit. And
then Rebecca and I have been part of this, approximately the same time, within a year or two of each other on this. In the nonprofits consulting group. Sean is fairly recent, and you and Bruce, Kelly and Bruce are very recent into the group. So I like that we have all of these. Can we think back to when we first joined? And I think Sean, Kelly, and Bruce have the most recent experience. What would you have liked to have had when you first joined?
A map, perhaps, and maybe that's not exactly the right word, but it's the one that first comes to mind. Something that would guide and orient and explain and help me find my way into the experience and the knowledge and the understanding. And a lunch buddy would be good too.
Join me in a cup of coffee?
I was just going to say we did that already.
Yes, you and I did, yeah. We're geographically close enough to do that.
We were lunch buddies.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Yeah.
What else would have helped? If I had known then what I know now, what would have helped? Kelly, I can kind of see your mind going.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Bruce said. I feel like I had a pretty soft landing into the group, which I appreciated. And as soon as my invitation went out, I got a kind of a flurry of replies from folks. And now I'm thinking that most of those were probably from the facilitators. When I think back on it, I didn't know about the brag basket. So probably if there could be like a 1-page map just with the expectations that, we have the brag basket, this is it, use it this way. Here are 10 things that you can do to get acclimated to the group. Just something kind of short.
An FAQ.
Yeah.
It's an FAQ of all the questions that we don't ask. The infrequently asked questions.
I'm thinking about that in the expectations and in the active reaching out to Kelly and sending that. We can make it very visible in the community. There's something very human about her getting a message from someone like, I'm Sean, I'm so glad you're here, being that human lunch buddy right out of the gate. and saying, and here are some things to help orient you. And also, if you want to get together for a conversation, we have these things called happy hours that are scattered all over the month. And here's the calendar, like those kinds of things. There's something about that the human invitation and welcome.
I love that. I love that. So if I invite Janet Unger into the group, she gets a message from Bruce saying, "Hi, Janet. So glad you're joining us. I've attached something that will help you get acclimated. And how would you like to to join us for one of these happy hours? We'd love to see you there." That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's coming from somebody who is not the person who first invited you into the group.
Yeah, there's a whole team of lunch buddies.
Whole team of a team of welcomers.
Speaking of happy hours, have we got a role identified for party?
The event planner. Happy hour host.
I think there is something in there, though, around this being active distributed leadership, because it will not, it's not like, how often is the norm that it falls on one human
Bless you.
to have to be in charge of all the logistics? If you're stepping into a space, we will provide the infrastructure and tools. And I think then there's also a tech resources team, like some folks who are pretty skilled at the different platforms for convening. But it's also an understanding of, here's what you can expect and support, and here's also, as you step into this role, what you will be responsible for. It makes it very clear.
So, yes, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Rebecca. One of the key elements of catalytic thinking is this whole idea of distributed leadership. That there are guidelines and frameworks that we work within, but things don't get done unless the person decides to do it. That it's not one person's job to make things happen, in which case it becomes directive, it becomes one directional. This is so that amongst the facilitators, let's say we had 10 facilitators, one of us is going to get to a question that's on there because we all take it upon ourselves to look at the Facebook group at least once a day. Nobody looks at it and says, "Mark, it's your turn to go and do this." Or "Rebecca, it's your turn to go and do this." We have whoever gets to it, does it. Occasionally, somebody will be in an airport and the other 3 facilitators are getting a note saying, "I'm at the airport. Did you see this post? I can't respond right now. Can you?" And it doesn't go to just me. It's going to all 3 of us, 3 of the other facilitators. And whoever can get to it, gets to it. And the same thing can happen, and we hope will happen, with the tech resource group, whoever steps forward with that, people who are comfortable with Zoom or something like that, where it's not one person who is the linchpin for all the tech stuff, but there's a group of people who receive a request, and whoever gets to it first gets to it first. And they're the ones who will reach out and find new people to join them and invite others.
I love it's the humans, and humans plus roadmaps, templates, instructions, things that can be shared repeatedly, so it's not a build from scratch every time you're interacting with a human. Like, I have all these tools that I can send you so you can understand how Zoom works in this case, or blah blah blah, and I'm also here as a human. But it's also it's setting people up for success with I really want to get to know you as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing a sense of sort of core values and core operating principles that then become part of that distributed leadership, so that there's not only distributed leadership, there's distributed empowerment and distributed responsibility and distributed accountability.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly how we work, Bruce. That's exactly how we work. It is awesome.
I've built a couple of organizations where I had to learn the hard way 20 plus years ago that was the only way to do it for me.
Yep. Absolutely. So this is the second time around, or third time around, that we've actually had people coming up and saying we need to be more explicit about how catalytic thinking framework is part of this group. And we can, if we think of additional roles, we'll shoot them in. But let's take the next few minutes before we start on to reflections of how can we be more explicit? What can we put in place that makes it more explicit about the catalytic framework and the way we work? The guidelines are one, operating principles. But if somebody just receives operating principles, it starts sounding like these are the rules, even if that's not what we call them. So what can we do, or what minor tweaks to what already exists will make it more explicit?
A couple of things come to mind about that. One is, are there any kind of technological tools that can serve to help map out all of this knowledge and content and make it searchable and accessible? There's a couple of different things that I've used. I haven't used any. There's one called The Brain. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Brain software, or a fellow named Jerry Michalski, who's perhaps the most famous user of it. If you look up on Google Jerry's Brain, you'll find it and you'll see what it is.
And it won't be Jerry Garcia's, right?
No. He made great neckties, Jerry Garcia, and a great guitar player. But the Brain software is a really unique type of dynamic mind map, a database, whatever you want to call it. It's not like other products that I know and use. And there's ways that might be a tool that would be helpful in this particular case. That was the first thing that came to mind. And there certainly are other kinds of tools. The other thing is, are there ways that there can be collections of stories told by folks like all of you, so that someone who is new can look at a YouTube channel and see just a few minutes from different people, 2-3 minutes, really short clips of somebody saying, here's my story of whatever it is, hosting, being a lunch buddy, being new, of catalytic thinking, whatever these things are that we are all talking about, so that people get the face, the words, the expression, they get the stories and can look at them in whatever way suits them and take meaning from it. And maybe then they could follow up and say, hey, I really like Rebecca's story. I want to talk to Rebecca. Or whatever.
I love that. And they'll also hear, I'm your fellow community member. I'm Rebecca. And if you want to get together for happy hour, if any of this interests you, contact me. Like, just explicitly offering the invitation.
Make that part of the structure of the framing of the story itself. I like that.
Frame the story with an invitation.
Yeah.
Close with the contact info. That's great.
In thinking about catalytic thinking explicitly, I'm thinking, we have videos. We can have people can watch things that we have already created at Creating the Future. Then, and come together for a live discussion if that interests you. But if not, here's a roadmap of some things you can read and view in whatever way you want to. I'm just imagining this gorgeous calendar populated with all types of things that people put in whatever's meaningful to them to host. So the invitation, the access info, and oh my God, if you need the lunch buddy tech team, here's some folks you can contact. Like it's all there in your roadmap.
I love this.
I love that too. A really interactive calendar would be.
And being very explicit, knowing words mean different things to people. So when we say happy hour, we also tell them, here's what you can expect. The intent is to get to know each other. Show up with whatever you happen to be drinking at that time, no different than when we think about what happy hours are all about. That's
Supply
exactly
your
what we're
own
doing.
drinks.
Yeah. So,
And it occurs to me we've got another rule. If people were to do such short videos, somebody needs to actually collect those into
and facilitate them. Yep.
if we want a video that has
Someone
half a
to-
dozen people telling little stories put together, because people only
Or,
click on
yeah.
so many things
Someone to collect and
and edit.
coordinate and edit the little videos.
and that gets to the bigger repository of things that have been shared even historically is a curator and archivist in a sense, because there's lots of learnings, and yes, there's the search function on Facebook, but it's almost like a yes and going forward. What are the ways we can curate assets and resources and humans in a way that people can roadmap into that?
Okay. Anything else on that kind of thing? Because I have a question that brought up.
Go for it.
What would it take to what would it take? What conditions need to be in place for people to self-identify and step forward for these roles?
They need to know what they are.
Clear invitation.
Clear expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah, how much time estimate it might be, and how often, and whether it's time limited or ongoing.
Well, it's even flipping that to a place where people can step into whatever is meaningful and comfortable to them, and letting them know that perhaps that weekly host thing is a defined week or not. But I think even showing that we're not prescribing the roles. We have role areas, and this list is not exhaustive, but here's the thinking behind them, and then also, and what else?
Right. So here's the outcome. Here's the highest potential of this particular role. How you decide, how you can step into it and make it your own in order to effect that outcome, that result. And I see that Bruce put into the chat the links to the brain, so I have to remember to save the chat because that's where all my notes are. Anything else that it would take for people to self-identify that, hey, yeah, I want to try stepping into that role? To know that those roles exist.
Well, I think also there'll be those who self-identify, but just as people need different things to feel comfortable. So that could be a conversation with someone. So that even gets to the pre-lunch buddies, like of conversations around it. So it's maybe reading what the roles are, but also opportunities for talking more about what is this really, like the human piece as well.
Okay.
And probably seeing the first lunch buddy in action and like, oh, I could do that. Seeing someone else step into something and being celebrated for it.
Invitations, role modeling.
Mentoring.
Mentoring. Has everybody seen that video of how important the first follower is? It's a video of a concert on this great big lawn, and nobody's dancing. It's this concert, and somebody gets up and starts like just dancing wildly and completely abandoned, and everybody's looking at him like, he's crazy. And then somebody follows him and starts dancing with him. alongside him. And then all of a sudden, everybody's dancing. So it's the importance of that first follower to model that it's okay to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good video. And it helps that he's an absolutely terrible dancer. And
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's awful. It is awful.
Once
It
they
is
get-
awful. Yeah.
And there's
And I-
something about being very human and humane and saying, hey, I'm trying out being the host this week for the first time. Saying that. Or, hey, I'm new at the Lunch Buddy thing, so can we figure this thing out together? Just
Mhm. That would be a good thing to model.
Yes, being explicit about being new at something. I'm trying this. This is a beta for me.
Mhm.
I'm loving this meeting. I'm just absolutely loving this. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think you have a lot of people out there that are shy about doing things. I think that, well, I think, something simple like hosting a week-long discussion, I think people will step forward. I think when they know that, the thing about volunteerism these days, when they know there's a defined period of time and stuff like that to move forward and do something, I mean, it's probably a little more difficult to find somebody who wants to be a long-term facilitator of something. But, you start small. And you already know there's a cluster group of people already that are the frequent visitors to the site and posting things. So at the very least, some of them might step forward and model effectively, and then others,
Oh, Sean, you just said something really profound.
Oh my gosh, quick. Everybody.
The idea that people will step forward if it's defined period of time or for a defined task. What if we invited people to be co-facilitators? I mean, there's 4 of us already for a month or 2.
Mhm.
Tell them, look, we're not asking you to be a facilitator for all time, but would you be willing to co-facilitate with us for the next month?
Mhm.
And make sure that the facilitators back channel the decisions they've made so that that person can learn from the current facilitators what they're doing. And then it's up to them whether they want to continue or not, but the expectation is it's only 1 month.
Well, and then you have more informed participants taking part in the discussions as well, because you couldn't do that for a month with the 4 of you and not learn a lot about what it takes to keep the group.
Oh, you'd be surprised. We can go whole months without having to do anything. It's wonderful. Because the group has created such a culture within itself, a set of behaviors that are modeled unconsciously by everybody in the group, that people who are new to the group just absorb it in many ways, or they don't step into anything because they're afraid of breaking rules. But for the most part, it is modeled so beautifully by everybody in the group. And I know that that is a function of the facilitators who came before me to have created that. But to find a facilitator for a month to help us out with no expectation of it being a continuous thing.
Nothing lost.
But that was great. That was great, Sean. Love the brain explosions.
By the way, I'm not looking to define another role here, and this is a role. This is a role perhaps that that's really much better at Facebook. A number of times you brought up people about that seem to be nice to know.
You're breaking up, Sean.
A little assessment or information about what members want or need and stuff like that. And I understand there's some kind of polling feature within Facebook that can be used to do things like that. So that might be a way to just poll people at various points about interests in different topics or features on the on the Facebook site or even on the website or things like that. Like I said, I'm not an expert in utilizing that. I just know it exists. It might be good to even send a message out to the membership. Who's really good at Facebook and polling? Would you be interested in helping us to do some polls about different information about,
Sure. One of the things I'd love to see is all of the documentation that we have in our files right now. They're not consistently titled. You have no idea what's in each of those documents that are up there without opening each one. So, there was a conversation about, does anybody have a template for contracts? And they say, yeah, sure, I'll put it up in the file. And it goes up and it might say, Wallace's contract or Wallace's template. You have no idea what that is.
Is that what a curator would work on?
Right.
I think there's even experimenting right now. We've done this before. Hey guys, we have a small task could use help on. Here's what it is. Anyone interested? And see who,
Yep.
I think it's even.
Yeah, organize a
Let it
few
begin.
folders, rename a few things. Start with a folder called "If You're
Ask
New."
for help. How human. Ask for help. How human are we? Well, we have, in the words of Click and Clack, wasted another hour and a half of our time.
Perfectly good hour. That's
It has not been a waste
Not wasted.
whatsoever. I am really energized by this meeting that we have identified so much. And as Rebecca said, there's a rhythm to our meetings. We start out with a positive thought, getting to know each other as human beings, what's going on in our lives. We get into the meat of the meeting. In this particular case, we did a little bit of a preview of here's where we are now so that we could continue and not redo the meeting, which sometimes happens in board meetings from experience. And then we end up with reflections on the meeting. So if you took notes, take 10, 15 seconds and stop and take a look at it and see what stands out for you from this meeting. And it doesn't actually have to be something that somebody said, but a thought that came to you or something like that. And reflect on the meeting.
I'm also reflecting on the garbage cans that are blowing around my house. They said we're supposed to have 50-mile-an-hour winds this afternoon. And fortunately, I know my garbage cans are empty, but they're blowing around.
Of course, if they're empty, that's why they're blowing around. They're not anchored.
Right.
I just looked outside my window to see, where are ours. I can't tell from here. I'm hoping my husband went out and brought them back in.
I think one of my reflections are, I think, you see this just very typical in terms of evolution of all groups and stuff like that. And I think the evolutionary step here is we've had a lot of invitations to participate. People joined on as members and stuff like that. And now we're just, actively interested. How do we increase the level of engagement? And that really means going beyond just invitation, but what can we do to really, get them to come through the door and say, I want to participate in some concrete way. And that's, as long as we keep that challenge before us, we can keep brainstorming and identify simple ways, and hopefully that will expand. But as I said, I think identifying activities and then modeling them, I think is certainly a good, great first step.
Thank you, Sean. Who's next?
I'll go. I feel much more engaged with this group after today, so I'm really glad that the invitation was put out there to join the call. And I can tell you, I'm much more likely to be posting, starting posts, adding my own questions, as well as, being more responsive to some posts that are already out there. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, we're so glad that you joined us also, because I'm hoping you do post about being in New York and wanting to meet up too. It's great to have you participate. I'm looking forward to having you participate in more. It's awesome. Awesome. Great. Who's next?
I really like what I hear also, and I like the inclusiveness of this. I like the combination of the emphasis on the person along with the underlying sense of principle and values and process, and the sort of the expansion of roles that include more people, that bring more people into it, both as beginners and new members like me, and people who are longtime folks who will take a new role as a lunch buddy or a host or a convener in some capacity. I like all of that.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Bruce.
I guess my main reflection has been how valuable it's been to have newer people talk about their recent experiences and how it made them feel when they joined the group, and what might be holding them back from being as engaged as they'd like to be if we haven't made things clear what's possible and how the highest potential of the group applies to them too. What would give you the highest potential? I think it's great that we've heard some new information on that today. I love Rebecca's simplifying the rhythm of the meetings. This is a message that doesn't require people to have read books. There's a simple rhythm to the meetings and when you get used to that idea, then the details kind of come out from that. But as a starting point, that's a really wonderful message to just say, use this rhythm, even when you're talking to your new lunch buddy. And you also, Rebecca, talked about the importance of saying, and what else, if we list some roles. I don't want to lose the idea that people can come in with a creative idea on how they'd like to contribute, or how the group could be even better for them. Many of you know I'm part of an online creative group as well that spends much of February talking to each other and never gets together like this because people are too busy trying to write 14 songs in 28 days. And listen to everybody's songs and comment on everybody's songs. Well, not everybody's. There's already about 3,800 songs posted since February 1st.
Jane, I was not aware that you do the 14 and 28.
I've never made it to 14. It really doesn't matter as long as you get a few songs out of it that you've otherwise done.
That sounds so intense.
But everything is positive. The two people that started it just said, hey, this is a constructive community. Keep your comments positive. And every comments page reminds people of that. And they all are.
That's right.
But it's what brings people together is the effort it takes to be creative. And I hope we can keep finding ways to be creative here. As each person joins, they change all of it.
Yep.
The group changes to accommodate each new voice and each new face. And there's going to be so many wonderful ideas keep coming forward if we put out the ideas that we've been talking about at these meetings.
Thank you. Thank you. Rebecca, reflections?
One is I delight in seeing who comes every time, because that means I get to know each of you a little bit better, and that in itself is a big fat gift. So I thank you for that. And two, it's like a happy hour here. Did we get a lot accomplished? Absolutely. But did I feel comfortable, relaxed, just can't wait to hear, okay, Bruce is about to speak. Can't wait to hear that. It's like an awesome happy hour in itself. So I think it's creating more of these opportunities for people to step into and delight in how comfy and cozy the world can be.
Thank you. As I'm listening to each of these, I'm trying to think of a reflection, and it's hard because I am so loving how this sequence has worked. I mean, there is somebody in this group who is on this call who once said, this stuff works and it works everywhere. And she's grinning in my upper left corner. She didn't use the word stuff. And this whole idea of, instead of saying, let's do X, Y, Z, we start with what is the highest potential that we're trying to come up with? And let's engage as many people as possible in figuring out what that is. And then let's engage everybody, keep engaging everybody to come up with the answers to questions and to come up with more questions to ask. And I could probably say this about most Creating the Future meetings, to say this process works because it starts with the people. Everything's about the people. And what do people need? If you work for a school, you don't need more pencils because the school needs more pencils. It's because the students need pencils. And what do the people need? And what I'm reflecting on is how we kept on coming back to what do the people need in order for them to feel, for us to feel like we can be engaged. And I just love how this meeting exemplified that. So thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for facilitating and bringing out the best in us, Susan.
Yes.
My chat is now saved, so I'll be able to write up the notes of all this. For those of you who are still watching this recording, thank you so much for participating. And please put your comments in either below the video when it gets posted or the blog post that's going to be written from our meeting. And if you did watch this all the way through, I hope you identified a couple of places where you want to step in. So, and let me know. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.